convertible bonds versus non-convertible bonds. So before we start with the discussion of the difference between the convertible bonds and non-convertible bonds, I will urge you to watch our class related video pertaining to bonds versus equity. So once we get an insight into the difference between bond and equity, so this discussion will be very easier and we will be able to comprehend the discussion. But still at the superficial level, I will try to recall the difference between bond and equity. Bond and equity with the help of an example. Okay. So here in this example, I have considered Tata as a company, and next I have taken two investors, investor A and investor B. So Tata as a company, let us assume it requires funding for some expansion or any other purpose. For some other purpose, Tata requires funding. So when it comes to funding, fund, it can raise the funds through different ways. One is it can raise through bond, another one is it can raise through share or equity. Okay, equity. Now let us assume investor A, he will buy a bond, and investor B, he will buy a share. Now let us assume the price of this bond is 1 lakh rupees. Similarly, the price of the share is 1 lakh rupees. Now difference is that, so this bond carries fixed rate of interest. Whereas a share, it does not have a rate of interest, but rather the investor will earn dividend. Okay, dividend. So the basic difference here is investor A has less risk, investor B has more risk. Okay, more risk. After 1 year, so investor A, he will receive fixed returns. Here I have mentioned the rate of interest as 10%. So initially he will give 1 lakh rupees and buy this bond. After 1 year, when he will return back the bond, so he will get an amount of 1,10,000 rupees. Why 1,10,000 rupees? Because the initially amount which he has paid is 1 lakh and the rate of interest is 10%. So he will receive a profit of 10,000 rupees. Okay, 10,000 rupees. Now coming to the investor B. Now he has given 1 lakh rupees and he has purchased a share. After 1 year, if Tata company it really performs well, then for every shareholder it will give dividends. So because of the good performance, let us assume Tata gives a dividend of 30,000 rupees. 30,000 rupees. So now what happens? So he has invested just 1 lakh rupees, but he will get 1,30,000 rupees at the end of the financial year. So he is getting a profit of 30,000 rupees. Investment is same. Okay, same. So here we understood that when it comes to equity or share, the profit is more. Okay, profit is more. But at the same time, risk is also there. For example, I have assumed here that Tata has performed well. But unfortunately, if Tata has not performed well, and let us assume it has suffered losses. So at the end of 1 year, so the dividends which it gives, probably it may not be 30,000, it may be very less. Let us assume it will pay a dividend of just 1,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees. So now what happens? So the profit is just 1,000 rupees on investment of 1 lakh. Okay, 1 lakh. So what we saw with respect to share is, if the company performs well, then you will get a good returns. If it does not perform well, then you will not get good returns. Okay. So here risk is involved, but high profit is also there. Here in case of bonds, risk is not there, but you also cannot expect high profit. Okay, high profit. So this is a fundamental difference between bond and equity. Okay, bond and equity. So now let us look into the difference between convertible bonds and non-convertible bonds. So convertible bonds, initially they are issued as a bond with an option to convert it into equity. Non-convertible bonds, once they are issued as a bond, there is no option to convert it into equity. Okay, convert it into equity. So this is a fundamental difference. So let us again look with the help of discuss with the help of an example. Now again I have considered Tata as an example. I have considered two investors, investor C and investor D. So investor C, let us assume he will purchase a convertible bond, and investor D, he will purchase a non-convertible bond. Okay, non-convertible bond. So here convertible bond, it can be converted into equity. Non-convertible bond, it cannot be converted into equity. Okay, it cannot be converted into equity. So here investor C, relatively he is taking a risk compared to investor D. Okay. So investor C takes more risk. So as he takes more risk, definitely profit involved is also more. Investor D, he does not take risk, so profit involved is less, but he will get fixed returns. Okay, he will get fixed returns. Now, after some time, if the investor want to convert the bond into equity, then he can convert it. But here he cannot convert the bond into equity. Okay, bond into equity. So that is why, so Tata, when it is selling the bonds, it will give the option to investor whether you want to purchase convertible bond or non-convertible bond. So if the investor says, I want to purchase convertible bonds, then Tata will say, okay, if you want convertible bond, then definitely you have to take risk. Okay, because tomorrow if our company starts performing well, then we'll give you greater dividends. So for time being, for your investment as a bond, we'll give you less interest. Okay, we'll pay you less interest. But if someone says, no, I don't want huge profits, whatever the average profits are there, that is sufficient. So I just want to go for non-convertible bonds. So in that case, Tata will say, okay, we'll offer you a fixed rate of interest. Okay, fixed rate of interest. So from here, we understood that whenever there is a convertible bond, the company will offer less rate of interest. When it is non-convertible bond, so it offers more rate of interest. Okay, more rate of interest. The risk involved for convertible bonds is more, for risk involved in the non-convertible bond is less. But the profit involved is more in convertible bond and less in non-convertible bond. Less in non-convertible bond. So as there is an option to exchange the bond for equity, they pay lower rate of interest. So convertible bonds, they pay lower rate of interest. So non-convertible bonds, they pay a higher rate of interest. Okay, higher rate of interest. Another important point to note here is when it comes to indexation to inflation. So let us assume there is an inflation. Okay, there is an inflation. So which kind of bond purchaser will benefit from convertible bonds? So, which type of bonds will benefit? So, convertible bonds, they afford a degree of indexation to rising inflation. Okay, inflation. Now, you will purchase a bond for 1 lakh rupees. But after 1 year, if the rate of inflation is also 10%, then whatever the profits you are getting on non-convertible bond, that is 10% profit, it will not make any difference because already the prices of all the other items have increased. Okay, increased. But supposedly, if you purchase a convertible bond, then after 1 year, if the company converts your bond into a equity, then it will start giving you dividends. So that dividends may be more than the inflation rate. Okay, for example, if the inflation is 10%, but dividends which you get is close to 20% or 30%, then you will not face any kind of losses. So that's why in between convertible bonds and non-convertible bonds, the degree of indexation to inflation is offered by convertible bonds, and non-convertible bonds, they do not offer any kind of protection with respect to inflation. Okay, inflation. Again, these are the important points to note. So this was a brief discussion about the convertible bonds and non-convertible bonds, a very important topic from exam point of view.